Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for today's Aspiring Women Speakers event with Heather. Let me introduce myself. First of all, my name is Abby. I work with Barry Cranford, who's the founder of Aspiring Women Speakers. That is just one of 15 plus communities run by RecWorks. We are a tech recruitment company, but we have a massive difference about us. So as a company, we're always on the lookout for more clients, and some of our best clients have come from community members who recommended RecWorks to their internal talent team. So if you're hiring for a new team or you're working for a company that is, please do let us know. And if you want to know more about what we can offer, just ping me a message on Twitter, LinkedIn or Slack. My name is as you see it on the display today, and we really look forward to working with you. The difference about our company is that we really do believe that recruitment can be a force for good in the industry beyond just placing people in jobs. We have a particular focus on learning, mentoring, and personal development. If people want to learn and others want to share their knowledge, we are more than happy to connect you through our communities and events like this one. We see this as giving back to those we've worked with in the past, but also paying it forward to those we hope to work with in the future. Earlier this year, we made our 4,000th introduction through our Meet a Mentor program, which is one of our free communities. And we're really excited about that and looking forward to making our 5,000th introduction through there. As I've already said, we love to give opportunities for people to connect, and this event is part of that. If you'd like to know more about any of our communities, please do get in touch with myself, Helen Lewis or Barry, if you know them as well, and we can take it from there. Today's session is being recorded and it will be available for you on our YouTube channel. I will put the link in the chat later on for you. If you have any questions during today's event, feel free to unmute and ask or pop them in the chat, and I'll be monitoring that so that I can chip in and ask Heather any questions as we go through. But with no further ado, let me hand over to Heather. Over to you.
All right. Thank you. And just clarify that I am sharing my slides.
Yeah, all right. All good.
Cool. All right. So hi, thank you for that introduction. And I am Heather Wild-Renzi, and I wanted to talk to you guys today about how not to perpetuate bro culture in tech. This is a diversity seminar, and I'm sure you've all been sent here today by your managers for some infraction you probably don't agree with, but maybe we'll change your perspective on that by the end of today's session. It's going to be less than an hour and only a little bit painful, and with a little work, we'll all get through this together. Just a quick warning, as all good diversity seminars, some of this is of the not safe for work variety. If you're triggered by naughty language and inappropriate behavior, then why on earth are you here? This is your last chance to leave. All right, you're still with me. Just a few things about me. I happen to be a woman, in case you didn't notice. I was an early employee at Evernote, one of those unicorn startups in Silicon Valley that had a very similar culture to the ones that we're going to talk about today. And of course, I didn't recognize it any more than most of you might have. I was a flight attendant at Spirit Airlines, an American budget airline like Ryanair or EasyJet, that was founded by an owner of some strip clubs, some gentlemen's clubs, that with current and former strippers as flight attendants. When I worked there, the culture was very much still Hooters Air. And I was the lone girl working in the boutique arm of a major game studio, which made me the de facto booth babe when we needed one, including having to dress as 7 of 9 when needed from Star Trek. And no, I don't still have the costume, which makes my husband sad. Plus, I've been a female CTO for years. In other words, my career is a personal case study of girl in tech. So I have a pretty good idea of what tech companies mean when they say they want to be diverse. So every tech company's idea of diversity looks a little bit like this. So we have Dan. He bikes to the office. He drinks craft beers only, and he has a beard. And then we have Jake. Jake weight trains at a real gym in person. He knows all the rules of every sport, and he can play it very well. And he has this curated stubble Then we have Brian. He has a mechanical keyboard. It's probably Dvorak. He plays D&D. He enters and wins mustache and beard contests regularly. We have Will. He has a founder's card membership. He day trades his crypto and talks about it endlessly. He has no beard. So, I mean, you can see this is a super diverse group already. Now we have Dhruv. He's from another country. He talks about Google nonstop, and he will have whatever facial hair that Google wants him to have. So yeah, we're very diverse here. I mean, it's the most diverse group. Then we have Girl. She has girl parts, and yeah, that's this is a tech company's idea of diversity. So this is why when you look on Glassdoor or whatever ratings, like on Blind or something, this is why you would kind of see these ratings for any tech company that's out there. And a lot of companies that aren't in tech, you're going to see these kind of ratings as well. Even companies, unfortunately, that are trying to have diversity, inclusion, diversity, equity, inclusion programs. So someone has felt marginalized by their workplace and wants to send out a signal flare. And when that flare is lit, executives of a company see the signal has been set. So they start throwing around those three words. But diversity, equity, inclusion are more than just buzzwords. Diversity is the who, inclusion is the how, equity is the what of what make people work cooperatively and collaboratively together. However, without context, there's no meaning. It all comes down to oppression, privilege, and marginalization. Oppression is a system that privileges one identity group while marginalizing another. Privilege may or may not be earned, but it gives increased access to power and institutions like employment, housing, healthcare, legal justice system, education, and so on. It involves choices, as in the more privilege you have, the more choices, conscious or unconscious, that you have. Marginalization means that you have both increased barriers to access and increased awareness and understanding of the inequalities that go with it. It's constantly reinforced at every level of your life in many complex ways. So all employees should be empowered to improve their personal performance, which ultimately will improve the performance of the whole business. Diversity leads to conflict situations if not properly managed. Inclusivity is what businesses can, inclusivity means that no one should be discriminated against. In order to address inclusivity, you can redress the imbalances of the past by example, implementing affirmative action. You can draw up policies that address the issue of discrimination and address gender discrimination by appointing both men and women in all positions. But you need to remember that it's not an even playing field for all candidates. Women will often apply for jobs only when they meet 100% of requirements. They often underestimate their abilities and performance during interviews. 27% of transgender people say they're fired, denied a promotion, or not hired because of their gender identity or expression. Half of transgender and non-binary people hide their identity at work in fear of discrimination. White applicants receive more callbacks than minority applicants with identical resumes. And minority job applicants are whitening their resumes in order to increase chances of interviews. Now, a group of people with a common characteristic who are legally protected from employment discrimination on the basis of that characteristic are protected under employment laws. Protected classes are created by both federal and state laws, and these are protected in both the US and the UK, and in Australia and most countries around the world. In the US, that's race, including color and nation of origin, religion, persons with disabilities, sex, including pregnancy, age, so anyone over 40, and in the US, additionally, veteran status, genetic information, and your citizenship, which is different from your race. Now, all of these people have different pain points that they feel, but many of them are they have in common. So a lot of these people, they'll feel that they have they don't have colleagues that they can talk to, who they can relate, that colleagues have made inappropriate comments and questions about their identities. They feel that they are unable to be authentic self with their colleagues, that they have a lack of credibility due to their identity, or they feel like an outsider because of their identity, or they feel they need to prove themselves. You can see that these actually are overlapped. Like all of these minority individuals have the same issues, the same pain points, but you wouldn't necessarily realize that that all of these are marginalized individuals. And that goes to bias. So the first topic we're really going to talk about is bias. I'm going to put up some of the most common statements some people have had, and then we can dive into them. But first, we're going to understand what are the different types of bias. So the first is affinity bias. That's hiring people who are the same as ourselves. Confirmation bias is searching for evidence to back up our first impressions. Beauty bias is judging people by the way they look. Horn's effect bias is negative assumptions that we allow to cloud our judgment. Attribution bias is how we perceive the actions of others. Conformity bias is changing opinions to conform with the group. And halo effect is perceived as having more positive traits than others. Affinity and confirmation bias are the most common forms. However, we utilize all of these unconsciously in everyday occurrence. So now I'm going to give you some statements that people feel are common. So implicit bias is nothing more than stereotyping. Unfortunately, implicit biases and stereotyping are closely related concepts that can be easily confused. Both implicit biases and stereotypes are types of associations that can be positive and negative. While it's true that implicit associations may form as a result of exposure to persistent stereotypes, implicit bias goes beyond stereotyping to include favorable or unfavorable evaluations towards groups of people. Additionally, implicit biases are activated involuntarily, whereas stereotyping may be a deliberate process of which you're consciously aware. Having implicit biases makes me a bad person. Bias is a natural phenomenon in that our brains are constantly forming automatic associations as a way to better and more efficiently understand the world around us. No one is a bad person for harboring implicit biases. These are normal human processes that occur on an unconscious level. I'm not biased. I have diverse friends, and I believe in equal treatment. Actually, we all have implicit biases. Research shows that all individuals are susceptible to harnessing implicit associations about others based on characteristics like race, skin tone, income, sex, and even attributes like weight and accents. Unfortunately, these associations can even go as far as to affect our behavior towards others, even if we want to treat all people equally or genuinely believe we're egalitarian. So now I want to give you a little bit of a pop quiz. So this means I want you to actually do something. Take a minute and write down or think about the 10 people that you trust the most. You can use your phone if you don't have paper or your computer because it's in front of you. And yes, I really mean for you to do this. These can be personal or professional relationships. It doesn't matter which. Just think about the first 10 people that pop into your head. They're likely the people that you're in contact with most, your ride or die people, your top 10 on MySpace, hopefully your spouse if you have one, or your family members. If you were in jail for something embarrassing, who are the first 10 people you would call to bail you out? In bro code, if you died, who would you trust to erase the porn from your computer? Got them? Good. Now look at the list. Is everyone on this list about the same? Do they have a lot of things in common? When we surround ourselves with people who are that much like us, we're never pressured to grow or to see things from a different angle or to challenge our own assumptions. We meet new people all the time, but an extremely small number of them actually make it into our inner circle. Look at this image and think about the people that you know and see every day. Many of them fall into level 1, which is hi, how are you type of relationship. That's an acquaintance. It's not a friendship. Only about 10% of the people we meet end up in level 2, what we would call a friend. And at level 3, we're talking about your closest and your best friends, the people that you trust the most. These are less than 1% of the people that we meet in our lifetime make it to this category. This is our family. It may be the people we're born into or our adopted family, but these are our most trusted people. Now that you understand and can see how your inner circle is very homogenous, you might think twice when voting for a school board member, promoting someone on the team, or voting in an election. And this is really important, especially today. It's election day in America, and people today are really stuck in the way that they think about things. When you find yourself immediately liking someone or something, stop and ask yourself how similar it is or they are to you and your worldview, be it their age, race, religious, or political views. Ask someone who is very different from you to offer their opinion on the same subject. The key is to listen to their perspective with an open mind. Don't think about why their view is wrong and your view is right. Even if that is the case, think about why they have a different view than you. What can you learn from their perspective? Unfortunately, sometimes our biases can be hidden due to other issues. Gender is everywhere in our lives, whether we notice it or not. Gendered language exists in most cultures, and social cultural norms have been passed down for literally thousands of years to determine whether we are in a matriarchal or patriarchal society. This whole diversity and inclusion and equality thing is practically brand new compared to the societies we're in. So missteps are to be expected, but we do need to learn from them. Our society has a set of ideas about how we expect men and women to dress, behave, and present themselves. Gender roles in society mean how we're expected to act, speak, dress, groom, and conduct ourselves based on our assigned sex. For example, girls and women are generally expected to dress in typically feminine ways and be polite, accommodating, and nurturing. Men are generally expected to be strong, aggressive, and bold. Every society, ethnic group, and culture has gender role expectations, but they can be very different from group to group. They can also change in the same society over time. For example, pink used to be considered a masculine color in the US, while blue was considered feminine. In the July 2018 issue of SC Magazine, women were 20% of the global IT workforce, up from 11% in 2013. It actually hasn't changed much in the last 5 years, so I don't need to, or I haven't updated this slide. 48% of the women had less than 3 years experience. In the US, the number is around 11%. To get more diversity in IT, stop requiring 5 years of experience. Seek other milestones. By now, all of the candidates with 5 years of experience are already working in the field. So the women are just jumping from job to job. Despite the fact that the number of female developers is growing, women still face major setbacks. Those who are over 35 are 3.5 times more likely to hold junior positions than their male peers. Women apply for a job, as I mentioned, if they have 100% of the qualifications. Men do it if they only meet 40%. What should you do? If you're interested in your next job, apply. If you know somebody who would be good at a job, encourage them. From an LA Times article, this report, based on over 500,000 anonymously shared employee salaries, found that the largest pay gap, adjusted for experience, education, position, location, and industry, existed among certain types of computer programmers, with men making an average of 28.3% more than their female counterparts. Among programmers, mainframe computer coders saw the greatest disparity. Significant gaps also exist in tech jobs, such as video game artists, which is my old field, information security specialists, which is my current field, and front-end engineers. But the gender pay gap measures the difference between the average earnings of men and women in the workforce. The gender pay gap is an internationally established measure of women's position in the economy in comparison to men. For example, in Australia, women earned an average of 18% less than men for the same job. This is systematic worldwide and top-down. Of the 196 countries in the world, there are 20 countries who have a female leader. Last I checked, although there are currently some elections going on, like in America, so that might have changed. And only 33 countries have ever had a female leader, be it a queen, president, or prime minister. Gender isn't the only place where people face discrimination, though. Another common place for workplace issues stems from race and religion. Workplace discrimination is more common than you think. In the UK, for example, 1 in 2 people have been discriminated against, and in the US, 2 of 3. So if you haven't experienced this yourself, it is likely that someone you know, someone that you live with maybe, has. However, that doesn't mean that everyone has reported it. In fact, quite the opposite. Most people who are discriminated against don't report the issue for fear of reprisals. Some people are even under the impression that if they report it, they'll lose their job. And unfortunately, in many cases, they're correct. If not directly, many people get forced out for toxic environments. Racial equity is corrective justice for communities that have suffered oppression. It's the systematic fair treatment for people of all races, resulting in equitable opportunities and outcomes for all. It is not just the absence of discrimination and inequities, but also the presence of deliberate systems and supports to achieve and sustain racial equity. Unique historical events, which serve to systematically oppress minority students, such as massive resistance, continue to have an effect on student success and their resultant career path. In other words, lack of access to the same opportunities at fundamental stages in their lives puts minority candidates at a disadvantage compared to their peers. Their foundational experiences and perspectives will likely be extremely different from yours. Another place that causes privilege bias is in language discrimination. In current and former Commonwealth countries like Australia, there's a bias towards English-speaking candidates and what is considered proper grammar. However, this causes an implicit bias against anyone who might speak English as a second language or have heavily accented speech or simply doesn't have great social skills. In France and Sweden, minority applicants would need to send out 70 to 94% more resumes than white applicants to receive the same number of responses as white applicants. In Germany and the US, minority applicants would need to send out 25 to 40% more. Though the US has shown persistent hiring discrimination since 1990, certain laws and institutional practices explain why it had lower levels of discrimination than most of the other 8 countries on this list. More discussions about race and ethnicity take place in US workplaces than European ones. No other countries require monitoring of the racial and ethnic makeup of ranks of employees as is required for large employers in the US. For instance, large employers in the US are required to report race and ethnicity of employees at different ranks, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And here is what the current picture is for Australia. While it's not perfect, it's getting better. job descriptions are getting better to attract more women employees, but they're actually starting to get more discriminatory towards men by using over-feminized language instead of neutral language. And that's causing a less equitable workplace. So depending on what you're going for, that may be fine, but this is an example of how it's possible to overcorrect. A candidate who works well with your team and adds value to the company culture is great. Unfortunately, looking for the wrong kind of cultural fit can lead to discrimination. Cultural fit doesn't mean that a candidate shares personal culture with your team, but instead that he or she fits with the values of the corporate culture. And of course, when we say cultural fit in a tech company, what we generally mean is someone like this. I mean, how else are we going to end up with the type of culture that attracts all the best tech bros? Working in a tech company can honestly seem like one never-ending game of bingo. But unfortunately, every game piece is biased by the underwhelming number of diverse people in tech. So it's almost impossible to win unless you're a bro. So the dangers of culture fit are that when you're thinking a good fit often means same as. Culture fit is not a common educational, cultural, or career background, a sense of comfort and familiarity with coworkers, shared enjoyment of such perks as ping pong and craft beer. What it is shared enthusiasm about an organization's mission or purpose. It's proven that when a team consists of people of different genders, ethnicities, cultural backgrounds, sexual orientations, etc., it produces more creative, innovative, and effective results. Diverse cultural perspectives can drive innovation. Working with people who are different from you may challenge your brain and sharpen its performance. All of this means you get more engagement and productivity. So how do you identify cultural fit? Ask how a candidate has demonstrated these traits in his or her past. Consciously avoid basing fit on whether candidates act, look, or speak similarly to your existing employees. Now, one thing that you need to worry about, and many of you are probably already aware, is that an unwelcoming culture can lead to the leaky pipeline. In tech, we have things like how hackathons can create apps like Titstare, where men are creating apps where it's just focusing on the women's breasts. At Black Hat, there's the strip show where female developers have to strip down. There's booth babes. The booth babe culture has been largely focused out in a lot of conferences, but it does still exist. The programmer culture. I mean, there's so many that I could list here, but all of these lead towards an unwelcoming, toxic environment in technology that have caused women to leave. So what do these people have in common? They're all attractive, they're all famous, and they were all involved in Gamergate. However, the people on the left were targets of vitriol, and the people on the right were not. Why does this kind of thing happen? Because women have been the marginalized group in technology. So how can we stop this? A lot of it comes down to recruiting. So we need to write inclusive job ads. It starts there. So we need to change male-based phrasing, like we're looking for strong, to we're looking for exceptional. Like we're looking for candidates who are assertive to candidates who are go-getters. We also need to change female-based phrasing. So we're looking for a community of concern to we're looking for a team focused on, or change nurture and connect with customers to provide great customer service. Consider which adjectives you're using and why. So energetic catalogers might be some like ableist language. So why are you using the word energetic? Your hiring manager also might have an unending list of qualifications in mind for a given role, but in order to highlight your commitment to inclusion, it's important to trim down the list. Studies show that while men are likely to apply for jobs that meet only 40% of qualifications, women again are more likely to hesitate unless they meet 100% of those requirements. Instead of including all of the nice to haves, only include the must haves. Then you'll see applications from women and minority candidates increase. If you'd still like to call out certain desired skills, you can soften the message with language like familiarity with, bonus points for, or if you have any combination of these skills. That said, it's a good idea to cut down your long lists no matter what. One study found that the average job seeker spends just 49.7 seconds reviewing a listing before deciding it's not a fit. And bonus points, avoid company or team acronyms and use plain language in your writing rather than jargon. So reframe the candidate requirements from what do you need to what do they get? So to advance creation of learning objects should be an opportunity to create and collaborate. User-focused interpersonal skills should be an opportunity to collaborate with peers and colleagues. State your values up front. This position is for an inclusive, user-focused librarian. Explain the opportunity. What are they going to get? And I always state the salary up front so that people know that what they are going to understand, like what they are going to make. Because if the salary isn't there, then they may be applying for a job that doesn't make that is out of their range. But the ad is not enough. So having thought about the value of diversity and written an ad that reflects this is not enough. If you build it, they will not come. You must recruit in ways and in places that underrepresented minorities will recognize. Make calls to colleagues and ask them to put forward candidates, or ask them to make calls to their colleagues and do the same. Do not access the professional organizations just electronically. Again, make calls to them. Invest time in describing the opportunity to them and ask them to make personal calls on your behalf, to have candidates call you and take those calls. Partner with boot camps, partner with diverse channels, like Recruit Disability, Hire Purpose, Hire Autism, Diversity Working, Women in Tech International. And then once you have done the work, it comes down to interviewing. Remember that unconscious bias. Innocent rapport-building questions may be construed as discrimination if the candidate does not get hired. Help protect yourself and the company by focusing solely on performance-based questions. Remember, these questions elicit a response about the candidate's personal life and living situation, which violates Pregnancy Discrimination Acts. For rapport, instead ask, what are some professional goals that you've set for yourself? Tell me about the method that you use to set these goals. To assess if they can meet job requirements, ask, can you work overtime or travel if needed? For race, color, and nation of origin, remember this is a protected class. Asking questions that would cause them to reveal their national origin violates civil rights acts. So instead you can say, I see that you currently work or live in a certain area. What's your favorite thing about living there? Are you authorized to work in my location? Again, asking anybody about medical conditions can violate disabilities acts and also may violate genetic information discrimination acts. So instead, ask, can you perform all aspects of this job safely and satisfactorily? But while the questions we covered on the other slides are merely ill-advised, questions about a person's visible or invisible disability could be illegal. So stick to performance-based questions rather than questions designed to subjectively evaluate the person being interviewed. Now, language, there's a lot of communication traps. Blaming others for difficulties and not shining the light on your own communication styles and behaviors is a major trap. Poor nonverbal communication, lack of eye contact or showing a distracted manner, not being present for the person who's seeking contact. This is closely linked to a closed door hierarchical policy. I understand this is also a sign of like persons on the autism spectrum. However, usually that is, you need to make people aware if that is an issue. Using an inappropriate tone of voice, so aggressive, patronizing, condescending, or sneering tones of voice, inattentive listening, interruptive talking over criticism, criticizing. The CC all button is something that's used frequently to publicly humiliate or shame people. Multitasking when talking to someone. So like one of the things that you can do is leaving your smartphone in your pocket when walking corridors so that even if you run into someone, you're present for them. Making assumptions before checking facts. Ask Socratic questions to get behind an issue. Another behavior which tends to follow this is making accusations. So saying someone is always late assumes that they're lazy and not interested. So try to say, you seem to be struggling with timekeeping. What's going on for you? Criticizing more than you praise. So not receiving recognition is a common factor for burnout in both men and women. Another thing with communication, gossiping or creating rumors, not dealing with issues directly via constructive communication, hijacking someone else's idea, any kind of harassment or bullying, verbal abuse, and not following basic etiquette like saying please or thank you, and unfiltered comments or jokes. All of these can be microaggressions that are easy to do against marginalized individuals at work. And I'm sure all of you have experienced these at different points in time. People don't give women credit for the ideas they have. Say something like, I like the way you agreed with X for her point earlier if you see this happening. To counterbalance this in meetings, call on someone who reports well first to set the example. Then call on one of the newer, younger, or less experienced workers. And again, this isn't just women that have this problem. It also could be people that have issues speaking up. So disrupt the way that you normally run a meeting if you see this happening. If you're doing status updates and you notice that people give their status and tune out everyone else, then you have a problem. Call people out of order randomly to keep them engaged. And if you have someone that dominates the conversation excessively, politely steer them back on course and give them a way to finish up. And don't call on them first. If it's not your meeting, try to help others if they get interrupted. Speak up and try to keep the amount of airtime fair. You may wonder why it's important to gender-proof your technology team's work zones. When you're faced with the relentlessly tough job of attracting and retaining minorities, as every tech startup is, creating working environments where people can thrive is an often ignored but highly effective strategy. Workplaces haven't always been the most hospitable environments for women, and it's not hard to imagine that the patriarchal culture that often permeates the average workplace is not more prevalent than the world of technology engineering. Women make up 44% of the population in co-working spaces. So it might come as little surprise that in recent years, co-working communities have shifted their demographic focus to more squarely to women with an attractive aesthetic, a mix of open and private areas, tranquil meditation rooms, and plenty of educational and cultural programs to attend. It's time for tech to take heed. The likes of arcade games, scooters, Nerf guns, etc. will make your space feel like a bro zone or frat house and make it hard for women to feel a sense of belonging. These things have become commonplace in tech work environments as a direct result of the programmer culture, and having them in your office simply reinforces this outdated stereotype. Hanging plants are a great way to bring greenery in without taking up workspace. Women also have a lower metabolic rate than men, so they tend to produce less heat than men do, which makes them feel colder. So let them bring in their heaters or at least change the temperature. So here are some things that you can do. As you grow, it's important that your values and culture are clear and consistent throughout, and you want to create spaces that provide for everyone's needs. If possible, gender-neutral toilets and flexible furniture solutions are additions that help remove barriers. As a startup, you may not be able to affect this design yet, but consider these areas as you grow. It's important to look out for subtle barriers in design, labeling, or use of space. Is it a mother and baby's room or one for parents and babies? Does it even need a label? Are transgender people first forced to use the disabled toilet as the others are gender specific? Have you allowed a cool gimmick to compromise accessibility and inclusivity? For example, carefully consider design features to make sure there's nothing too masculine. Creating an inclusive workspace requires an awareness and openness to considering the needs of different people. Flexibility of the space is key to allowing you to change and adapt as you evolve. Of course, it's possible to create a space that's physically accessible, but considering how inclusive or collaborative is a step further. For example, someone in a wheelchair may be able to access their desk, but can they use the AV equipment in the meeting room or the sink in the kitchen? Can they use the space in the same way as a more mobile person? An open plan office may be great for creating collaborative areas, but how does someone with a hearing impairment collaborate effectively in that environment? We're all unique, and so are our needs, styles, and preferences. Consider how your workspace can support that. Explore how your space could be experienced by new parents, introverts, extroverts, different learning and thinking styles, people with different religious beliefs, mental and physical health needs. Of course, you can't realistically account for every single individual style, need, or request, but aim to create sufficient flexibility in your workspace design for the future. Global COVID-19 deaths exceeded 15 million worldwide, with more than 500 million infections. COVID-19 devastated the global economy and severely harmed critical pillars of society, including provision of education and healthcare, community activities that are key for physical and mental health, impact on countries with higher rates of poverty and fragile system. Evidence from previous health crises show that women and adolescent girls are disproportionately affected. Government measures to contain the crises, such as lockdowns, overwhelmingly impacted women and people working in the informal sector, which is over 75% women and young people. This is absolutely causing ripple effects into the tech sector and workforce around the world. So all of these things that I've talked about can help to create a culture of openness and action. There's so many things that you can do, but if you take one thing away from this whole slide that I'm talking about, it's basically just don't be an asshole. As I mentioned, I mean, it's be nice to people and really have empathy. Here, just as an individual, you can reflect on how bias shows up in your work, showcase a wide range of identities, use inclusive language, and seek out the best accessibility practices. When talking to other people, ask for input, communicate your values, share ideas with colleagues, and as a structural change, help set diversity, equity, and inclusion requirements for partners, vendors, and suppliers, and include equity in your definition of success. And if you do all these things, those reviews at your company, they'll start to go up. They're not going to get magically better overnight, but they are going to change. It's something that we have to constantly work on and actually mean it. Some of the resources for this talk, it's one of the best things here is this book, Whistleblower, My Unlikely Journey to Silicon Valley by Susan Fowler. If you haven't read it, I absolutely highly recommend that. The 50 Ways to Fight Bias training is excellent as well. And the Project Implicit, it's full of tests that you can take to find out where your biases, your personal biases are. So I will leave this up while we go into the chat portion. So I'm open for Q&A.
Wonderful. Debbie's just said, is it possible to put those links in the chat at all so that we can copy and paste them? That would be amazing.
Yes, let me.
I was going to ask you as well if you had any resources you'd recommend. So that was my question for you.
Let's see if it will let me just copy from here. I will work on doing that.
Working on that. Does anybody else have any questions you'd like to ask? Please do feel free to unmute or put them in the chat if you're not able to unmute.
I'm going to end the slideshow so I can copy them for you.
That's fine. That's fine. There we go. We've got some bits through on the chat. Great talk. Thank you so much. I will definitely rewatch the recording. No questions, but it was wonderful. Great presentation. Thank you. So yeah, I agree with all of those. And Heather's putting all the links in the chat for us, which is amazing. Thank you. That's wonderful. I think that's always the thing that strikes me, actually, from having heard a talk like you've just done. It's where do I even begin to change things? Like, how can I start? And the answer is, you know, obviously using the resources that you've recommended there. Where I can do the project implicit kind of survey bit to see where my natural biases are. I can read Susan Fowler's book to get better insight and then apply that to my workplace and my life and go from there. So yeah, thank you.
I need to copy them for you. Yeah, no, these are absolutely yeah, it's a difficult topic, and it's an absolutely important topic. And I really hope that, I mean, I don't hope this, but I know that a lot of us have been through a lot of the things that I've talked about today. Yeah, it's a really difficult thing. And I see it's mostly women, or it's all women in this talk right now. But when men are in this talk that I give, they don't really understand. And then they come and they speak to the women afterwards, and they're like, I don't understand why some of you are crying.
And it's like, because this is true for me.
Yes,
that's why. That's
yeah.
the issue.
And every time I give this, I end up adding something else. Like the first time I gave a version of this in the UK, some Muslim women that had come over from Pakistan mentioned, oh, you have a thing about African American people in America, but you haven't covered the racial bias elsewhere. And so they added, so they explained to me, like, okay, so we're dealing with like all the Muslim issues here, plus the accent issues, and so like we can speak English perfectly fine, but people pretend they can't hear us because we have a little bit of an accent, or because we're wearing a hijab, or all these things. So I mean, and other people, like I deal with an Indian development team and a Russian development team, and like I have been working with like lovely wonderful developers in Russia and in India forever, but I can't get them on a call with each other because the bias between them, they pretend they can't hear each other.
Wow.
And I mean, even some people on my team, like they're like, the accents are so thick, they'd rather just type in Slack to each other. But it's just, yeah. So the bias is there, and yeah, I mean, people assume because you are not, I mean, we all know these issues. It's not just women. It's not just, I like to mention the overcorrection in Australia, where now men are the marginalized group.
Which is a bit nuts, isn't it? It's, like you say, it's gone the wrong way almost. It needs balancing out in the other way.
Yeah, and in America, there's a lot of men that are saying that like, as a white man over 40, I can't get a job, and it's more like, if you're a white man over 50, you can't get a job, and then people are like, oh, I don't want to listen to you about that because you're like, how dare you? But no, it's true. It's like, if you're over 50, people don't want to interview you, and but it's not just white men, it's anyone over 50. There's the ageism thing, but they don't want to listen to you because they assume that like you've had privilege all your life. But so
that's not necessarily the case though, is it?
No.
obviously.
So like,
Yeah.
like all of these biases that we have to call them out. We have to understand them. And like as women, I think that because we're a marginalized group in many ways, we should have empathy towards all of the groups. So like,
yeah, I agree. Definitely hope so anyway.
yeah. So anyway, I hope
any
this
other
was helpful.
questions for Heather?
I see Debbie. Yeah, I mean, it's like IT having no women. Yeah, I mean, and I'm hiring right now for a position, and even like it's interesting how on my team, like I am the like my tech department, like being run by a female CTO, I have the most diverse team in the company, and also I run a conference, and like the conference that I run myself, like that I'm the head organizer, but also I partner with like I run a track at Devoxx UK, in it's a developer conference in UK, and I also have the most diverse track at that conference. So it's always like when you have a minority in charge, you tend to see more minority candidates coming in. And it's not just it's not just women, it's just all like all minority candidates coming in. But if you have just the old boys in charge, then that's who they're going to hire. So it is intimidating to start from ground zero. But that's why it's helpful to reach out to others that have been in your place. And the mentorship program that this team does is very helpful for that. So
feel free to get in touch with me, and I can get you in touch with the Meet a Mentor program. That's absolutely fine. So,
well, thank you for coming today. Those of you that are watching the recording, feel free to reach out. And I hope this was very beneficial.
And all that's left for me to say is thank you, Heather, for sharing your knowledge with us. And obviously it will be out there for other people to see as well. And thank you to everybody who came today. So really great to see you. And I look forward to seeing you at our next event. Have a great evening.
Bye.
Bye.